ethnic religious group, which means that my people have last names that only my people know, such as my last name's Bird. Another one is Warkentine, Franz, Schmidt, trying to think of some other ones. You know, stuff like that, which you guys have no idea of, and trust me, it might be a good thing that you don't know this. But over time, once people start marrying outside of their ethnic religious group, things change. You know what I mean? Like people, church membership declines, people move on. Like I married outside of my ethnic religious group, and my parents haven't forgiven. No, actually they have. They're cool. They really like my wife. They better, because I married her. So, but that's what happens, you know. As time goes on, the grip of the church starts to decrease, and in order to adjust to that, by 1662, the Puritans had this idea called the halfway covenant, which basically permitted the unconverted children of saints to sort of become church members, to try to increase the numbers of the church. So what this means is, you might be a son or a daughter of one of these early Puritans, but you haven't become converted yet, but you can still kind of join the church. It's like a halfway church, not a halfway house, okay? It's a halfway church. My question to you is that what the Puritans would want? Is that a pure church? God, no. Okay, it is not. And then it starts getting worse because more people start coming in. Crazy people like Quakers. Well, they're not really crazy, but you know, by 1656, Quakers start to come into the New England region. We're Quakers. Quakers are way different than Puritans, okay? Quakers are folks that believe that God spoke to them through an inner light. They were kind of like, oh God, what can I say? They were kind of like people that believed, I don't know if you guys have ever had the opportunity to go to a Quaker church service. You're like, Mr. Bird, we have never been to a Quaker church service. But what they do is they don't really have a church service like what you might be used to. See, nowadays in 2015, it's music, and, a sermon, and, prayer and all this stuff. Quakers gather, sitting down, and they might stand up with a word that God gives them, because they believe that God speaks to you. And the word Quakers comes from not Quaker oats, okay? It comes from God shaking your soul to make you say something, so your soul quakes. And not only that, but the Quakers had a totally different belief system. The Quakers were very tolerant of other people, and even, oh my gosh, this is going to kill the Puritans here. They actually believed in equality for women. Oh, that is so un-Puritan. You know what I mean? Also, everyone always wants to know about witches. Salem witch trials. Let's talk about that for a minute. Did witches really exist? The answer is no. Who were witches? Witches were women that didn't conform to what the Puritans believed. They were usually single women who never got married. They could be, at that time, we would call them lesbians. They didn't really know what to call them back then, but they would be considered quote-unquote different. And I got to tell you this, all the historical records at no point show that any woman who was a witch burned at the stake in a witch trial had anything ever to do with spells, magic, or any of that. It's just that they didn't fit the norm. And that's why they were persecuted. So if you had, let's say you're like 37 years old like me.
Well, they had red hair.
Or red hair, or something that makes them distinctly different. Now, I'm not saying that in every community, but certainly anything that makes them distinctly different. Yeah, go ahead.
They didn't like affiliate themselves with demonic worship?
Absolutely not.
Okay. I hear that all the time, so that's a very big
No.
that.
No, witches, the historical evidence is pretty clear. All of the evidence of quote unquote witches burned at the stake were just women who were old, single women who had absolutely no husbands, nothing. They're just different. Yes?
And also outspoken.
Yeah, outspoken, because a woman's not supposed to be outspoken. Well, I don't know.
No, they wouldn't.
They would burn
I'm gonna fire.
I won't burn you.
That's good, thank you.
So you're saying it was like Monty Python? She's a witch.
Yeah, and you know the sketch, right? Monty Python. How do you know she's a witch? Well, she looks like one. Okay, that's a reference that you guys should all YouTube tonight. Monty Python's Holy Grail. The witches. They're on a witch hunt, and he's like, "How do you know they're witches? Well, she looks like one." Well, okay.
I got it.
Just YouTube that. That's even a verb. I don't know. Okay, so just to kind of blow through this a little bit, the English colonies started to grow, like the New England colonies started to grow, and you can see like in terms of ethnicity who came to New England, and this is kind of interesting. As the white people started to come, the green here, the Native Americans started to decrease, and down on the bottom there was even some African Americans that made it up to New England. Now, a little bit about that. Now, remember Roger Williams? Roger Williams was also one of the first abolitionists. You guys know what that word means? Abolitionists are people who believe that slavery is bad. And he's one of the people that wanted to form a society where, or a state or a region where there wouldn't be slavery. That is why New England became the first region where they outlawed slavery later on in the 1600s. Okay? But they allowed slavery down in the South, of course, because that's what their economy depended on. But you can see there were a few, population-wise, some free African Americans, not slaves. Okay? The southern colonies are growing exponentially at this point, mostly because of tobacco, mostly because of slavery. You've got the middle colonies growing in the 1600s, and of course the New England colonies. So the population is growing like crazy. Let's talk a little bit about the middle colonies, if I can. The middle colonies are essentially, if these are the southern colonies, these are the northern colonies, like New England, and these would be, all this stuff is kind of like the middle colonies. And you have at first, not the English, you've got the Dutch right here, in what's called New Netherland, which is basically New York State. New Sweden, which is going to be Jersey, which is right here. And then eventually this area here called Pennsylvania, and let's get into that a little bit about the colonies. So let's start out with talking about New Netherlands and New York. So New York, as we know it, was not an English colony at first. That was a Dutch colony. However, and what's present day New York City was called New Amsterdam, okay? And in New Amsterdam, they had basically a very diverse group of immigrants. In New Amsterdam, you could have almost from any walk of life, from anywhere in Europe. It's a very tolerant, very diverse community. Kind of like later on with Philadelphia. If you watched the video last week, one of the first things we did is Philadelphia became one of those cities too. But the East Coast is like that. Now, as time goes on, New Amsterdam, the Dutch get kind of muscled out of what we call New York, and New York becomes an actual colony when troops from Great Britain actually literally take it over. Okay, so it becomes what we call New York. Now this is really stupid, but if you like sports, I like sports. What's the New York basketball team that really sucks this year? It's the Knicks, huh? Okay, the word Knicks is short for Knickerbockers. But you're like, well, it's not nothing to do with anything, Mr. Burke. Knickerbockers is a slang word for the Dutch. So when you watch the Knicks, it's the Knickerbockers. Dutch. Okay. You can tell your friends, tell whoever you want to. It got its name from. Oops. It got its name from the Duke of York in 1664, who was King James's brother, after England took it over, and that is why it currently has the name New York. The middle colonies, I think one of the biggest things that you should try to understand about the middle colonies is that they're very diverse. In New York, for example, nobody came to New York because it was like a religious haven or something. Like Puritans weren't flocking there. People were flocking to New York because it provided a business opportunity mostly. Like religion was not a big deal, and it certainly wasn't a prerequisite for you going. But the whole point of not only New York, but Eastern, like the middle colonies, was to create tolerant areas, tolerant countries where people of all walks of life could come. Yes, ma'am.
So when the Duke of York established it in New York, they didn't kick out people that were previously there, right? The colonists.
No. They let the Dutch stay. They just got rid of the Dutch army. Said, you gotta get out of here. But no, they let the Dutch stay. They let whoever stay. Like a lot of different people were there. We're talking about slaves from Barbados were there. We're talking about some Africans. We're talking about Germans, Swedes, all kinds of people. So, and that's the way New York City is today. I mean, it's just like the most, well, I don't know if it's the most diverse city in the world. It's pretty diverse. Absolutely. Okay. So, here you go. This is kind of relating to the kind of boundaries that we have today. These would be the boundaries of the middle colonies. Of course, today New York goes all the way out here, right? And so does Pennsylvania. But all these colonies think one thing: toleration and economic opportunity for all. But the one that really is most interesting to me is not New Jersey, although New Jersey is very interesting for reasons that I won't want to go into. But New Jersey is another area where it's very diverse, very tolerant. Nobody's checking your religious affiliation when you walk through the door, I guess you could say. But Pennsylvania is typifies what the middle colonies is all about. And you've got William Penn. Okay? Bless you. Now let me ask you guys a question. So for those of us here last week, what kind of colony did William Penn want to put together? Besides saying Pennsylvania.
Peaceful.
A peaceful colony. A peaceful colony where all can be together and live as one. And we can all be a human family. Okay? William Penn was a very different kind of religious leader in a lot of ways, because he believed that the